Joining us now, co-chairs of the newly launched For Country Caucus in the House, Democratic Congressman Jimmy Panetta of California and Republican Congressman Don Bacon of Nebraska. Congressman Panetta served with the Special Forces during the war in Afghanistan, and Congressman Bacon served for deployments across the globe, including the war in Iraq. And both are recipients of the Bronze Star, and thank you so much for your service. You guys want that service to translate. I guess, Jimmy Panetta, I'll start with you, especially when it comes to restoring trust. Where are the biggest areas where trust has been broken?
Well, look, let me start where trust is going to be formed, and you're seeing that right now with the For Country Caucus, where you have veterans like Don and myself and a number of the veterans of the freshman class who are actually coming together using that common ground that we have based on our service to basically understand what it takes to get things done, and from there, doing it in a civil way and focusing on areas that we can help our constituents, veterans, national security, and national defense. And I think that's an area where we can easily come to the table, have these types of civil conversations, which can lead to discussions about other topics, such as immigration and infrastructure.
So,
Mike Barnacle.
First of all, both of you members of Congress, this is kind of a news story. We've got a Democrat and a Republican standing right next to each other. Apparently civil behavior between the two of you. Yeah, that's great stuff. But let me ask you both, as veterans, the authorization legislation, it's been nearly 20 years. We still have forces in Afghanistan, still have forces in Iraq. What do you favor with regard to our position right now, our policy right now, men on the ground right now in Afghanistan?
Well, if I may, I'll start.
Exactly.
Both Jimmy and I agree that we need a new authorization. We were original co-sponsors last Congress to bring this back up to a vote. The last authorization was 2001 and 2003. We've been in Iraq and Afghanistan ever since, and we need a new authorization. We need to have Article 1 responsibilities, and Congress needs to step forward on that. So this is one area that Jimmy and I have been working together on for already over 2 years.
Exactly.
Congressman Bacon, a question for you. We've discussed a lot this morning about the Mueller probe and its findings, but how it's really going to be sort of the real-world, everyday issues that impact people's lives that are probably going to dictate the next presidential election and other elections to follow. Give us one of those things, of course, would be the government's response to natural disasters. Can you give us an update as to what's going on there with the terrible flooding in Nebraska, and what do you want to see Washington do?
Roughly 2 weeks ago when I went home, we knew there's going to be some flooding, but the word was it would be manageable, not a problem. We could get through it. 36 hours later, it was the worst national disaster Nebraska has ever had. Thousands of people lost their homes. We've lost about $1.4 billion in agriculture and homes. And the Air Force Base that I commanded, a third of it is underwater. So I appreciate the quick response from the federal government. And I know we're going to do a bipartisan work here to get funding back to those farmers and those who lost their homes in Nebraska. But it's the worst national disaster in Nebraska's history.
Yeah, it is terrible, and certainly our thoughts and prayers are with you and all the people of the state of Nebraska. Boy, it has been a tough stretch for them. Let me ask both of you about something that's been in the news, obviously, in the debate for quite some time. Congressman, Syria has obviously been a vexing problem for this country, for the Middle East, for the world over the past 5, 6, 7 years. It looks like the United States actually figured out how to get the right number of forces in there to push back on Iran, on Russia, on Syrian aggression. But yet the president wants to move as many troops out as possible. Obviously, many in the military community want him to stay right there. What do both of you think about what America's future should look like in Syria?
Well, as someone who, as an intelligence officer who served with the Special Forces in Afghanistan, I understood exactly the recipe for what is needed to fight that sort of counter-operation, that counterterrorism operation fight. And that's when the president made this decision to, fly by night, pull out all the troops. I knew that was a mistake. And what it takes is a small focus group that can actually target individuals. And what it comes down to is take them out where necessary. And I think we need to keep that type of force on the ground there in Syria, because as we saw in Afghanistan, it does work.
I think we found the right middle ground. You know, the president initially announced that withdrawal. I pushed back as well. But now we're looking at 400 troops. We need a minimal level of troops in Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan to prevent that void that ISIS would fill in, or the Taliban in Afghanistan. So I think we're in about the right spot where we're at now.
All right, the co-chairs of the newly launched For Country Caucus, Congressman Jimmy Panetta and Don Bacon, thank you both for being on this.